Our son was suddenly diagnosed with leukemia, and his biggest wish was to see Aunt Xanda in a wedding dress. My husband agreed, saying, "We'll just get married to Zanna. Once our son finishes his treatment, we'll get divorced." I readily agreed to this request and divorced my husband. Not long after, I saw on my son's social media that he was attending my husband and his first love's wedding, looking very lively. The caption read, "Witness Dad's happiness, and it's another day of tears for true love." I smiled and turned off my phone. I took the hand of the person beside me and boarded the plane to City Y1. After leaving the Civil Affairs Bureau, Jasper and I's bright red marriage certificate had turned a dark green. This meant our marriage was over. Upon receiving our divorce certificate, our son and Xanda were both excited. Our son curiously flipped the divorce certificate back and forth. "Great, Aunt Xanda, you can finally marry my dad." Then he seemed to realize he'd said something wrong and covered his mouth, glancing at me a few times. Seeing this, Jasper took my hand and comforted me. "You'll always be my wife, that won't change." Xanda said with red eyes, "I'm sorry, Yvonne. For my sake, you two are going through all this trouble at your age." I didn't say anything. When she didn't hear my comfort, she burst into tears. She pretended to pull me and Jasper back to the Civil Affairs Bureau. "Yvonne must be angry with me. Go back and remarry quickly. Don't let me cause trouble in your family." Jasper and our son quickly surrounded Xanda to comfort her. Our son pulled me in front of Xanda, almost causing me to fall because he pulled too hard. Mom quickly apologized to Aunt Xanda, "Say you're willing." I rubbed my sore wrist and asked him, "Are you willing to get treatment now?" His face turned pale, and he nodded. I said nothing and hailed a taxi on the roadside. My son grabbed me. "Mom, are you mad at me?" I just saw that Aunt Xanda was so devoted to Dad and felt sorry for her, so I wanted to fulfill their wish. I didn't answer, but just tightened his coat. "It's cold, take care of yourself." I turned and got into the car. As I got into the car, I vaguely heard Jasper shouting, "Yvonne, come home with me." I slammed the car door shut, shutting Jasper's voice out along with it. Home. There was no home since I found out about their plan. The quiet, confined space of the car gave me some sense of security. The driver in front didn't speak after I told him the address. As quiet as a statue, my emotions began to surge, and I tried to hold back my tears, but they still fell. My memory went back to that day. After agreeing to divorce my husband for my son, he finally agreed to receive treatment. I made chicken soup and went to the hospital to give it to my son. When I reached the door, my son's mocking voice came. "My stupid mom is so easy to deceive. As soon as I say I'm sick, she agrees to everything." I was stunned. The son in front of me was always so sweet and cute. How could he say such a thing? As I was stunned, a voice sounded, "Thanks to Iker, when will Aunt's lifelong wish be fulfilled?" It was my husband's first love, Zanna. Iker comforted her. "Aunt Zanna, don't be a stranger. You've watched me grow up since I was a child, and you've been with my dad for so many years. This is what I should do," Jasper said. "When we get married, let's have a big celebration as a family of 3. "Of course." Inside the room, they were all happy and laughing, and I outside the door tightly covered my mouth, forcing back the shock and pain in my heart. I poured the carefully cooked chicken soup into the toilet, and as I watched the oil float, thinking about what my son and husband had said, a wave of nausea came over me. I vomited until I was dizzy, but I couldn't shed a single tear. Since my son got sick, I've been running back and forth between the company and the hospital. In order to raise money, I borrowed from everyone around me. In order for him to receive treatment with peace of mind, even though he asked me to divorce him, because he felt sorry for Xanda, I agreed. In the end, it turned out to be a carefully designed scam. The vibration of my phone pulled me back to reality. I picked it up and saw that it was from my best friend Zoe. "Is the 100,000 I transferred to you enough? If not, I'll go borrow some more. How is Iker's doctor doing?" I transferred the 100,000 back to her. "No need, Iker is not sick." Came from the other side. Then she asked, "What do you mean?" I was too weak to type and curled up in the back seat. Zoe called me, and I answered in a panic. only to hear a familiar male voice. Where are you? We'll come find you. 2. Zoe found me sitting on a park bench. Are you okay? She asked. I shook my head, but my swollen eyes said it all. I looked up at Zoe and the man beside her. How come you're here? Hudson looked at me with concern and retorted, Why? Can't I come? Zoe interjected. Hudson just returned from abroad and heard about Iker's illness. He asked me if I could ask you for help. Speaking of which, what do you mean Iker is not sick? I calmly told them everything I knew. Zoe scolded. Neither of those two is a good person. She was about to go find them to settle the score, but I quickly stopped her. Forget it, so? Zoe's eyes were already red. Are you just going to let them get away with it? I shook my head. Since they want to be a family so much, I'll let them be. After some comfort, I asked them to take me home. It wasn't because I had any attachment to that place, but I didn't want to leave my things there. After packing up my things, Jasper called. After answering, Jasper said, The wedding venue is looking good. You should come and take a look. I don't want to go. When he heard my refusal, his voice paused. If you don't come, Iker will be worried. His illness has just improved, and he rarely has the energy. I didn't refute anything, I just said, I've already promised Iker, and now Xanda is Iker's mother. It's not appropriate for me to be there. Jasper hesitated. Aren't you angry? I smiled. Why would I be? I'm willing to do anything for my son. Tell Iker not to think too much, just do what he wants. Jasper on the other end of the phone was very moved. Yvonne, it's my good fortune to have a wife as understanding as you. After a few more words, I hung up the phone and called a courier. I sent part of my belongings to Zoe's place temporarily, and I threw another part directly into the trash. After tidying up everything, I saw the family portrait and photo album in a prominent position. Without any hesitation, I found an empty space and watched as they were slowly consumed by flames. After burning the photo album, I lay in bed, feeling as if all my strength had been drained. Many images flashed before my eyes. One moment Jasper was confessing his love to me, and the next moment Iker was asking me for a divorce. In the end, they all twisted into a vortex, becoming them three laughing happily in the hospital. I fell into a deep sleep amidst the chaotic thoughts, until Jasper's actions woke me up. How could you be so careless? You don't even know how to cover yourself with a blanket when you're asleep. What if you catch a cold? I looked up, and he was tucking the blanket around me, muttering to himself. I stared at him, trying to see his inner self behind his gentle and affectionate appearance. Feeling my gaze, he asked, Is something uncomfortable? I shook my head. How is the wedding venue set up? It's almost done. As long as the money is in place, I can get it done no matter how tight the schedule is. After a pause, he stroked my hair behind my ear and said softly, You've really suffered these past few days. I'll make it up to you when everything is over. Perhaps because his voice was too gentle, my eyes turned red. Jasper patted my hand. Be good, don't cry. I hummed, and he comforted me a few more words before he was about to leave. There are still some steps in the wedding ceremony that I need to rehearse for. Jasper. He turned around and asked, Is there anything else? I clenched the sheets tightly and asked in a trembling voice, Is there anything you and our son are hiding from me? A hint of guilt flashed in Jasper's eyes as he hesitated before speaking. 3. Are you too tired lately? You've been thinking too much. I'll take a leave of absence for you today, so you can have a good rest. My clenched fist suddenly relaxed. I took a deep breath and thanked him sincerely. Thank you, Jasper. Thank you for continuing to deceive me when I softened again, which strengthened my resolve to leave. Jasper thought I was thanking him for taking a leave of absence for me. He smiled without saying anything and closed the door. I called Zoe. Zoe, help me find a reliable lawyer, one who specializes in divorce cases. My friend wasn't surprised at all. Okay, let's meet when I find one. A few days later, she invited me to meet at a coffee shop. The lawyer Zoe recommended was a steady one. After understanding the situation, he quickly gave practical and effective advice. After agreeing on the details, he returned to his law firm to draft the divorce agreement and left. Soon it was time for Jasper's wedding. All the guests at the scene didn't know the details, only thinking that Jasper was remarrying. They were all discussing it. Jasper and Yvonne were doing well. Why did he suddenly marry someone else? I don't know. Looking at his son's appearance, he seems to like this stepmother quite a bit. Xanda has been waiting for Jasper for so many years, and now she finally got her wish. On the stage, Xanda walked slowly towards Jasper, wearing a complex wedding dress. I saw tears welling up in Jasper's eyes. Iker, standing beside him, held Xanda's skirt, his eyes full of emotion. Jasper gently lifted Xanda's veil and said in a choked voice, "Xanda, today you are the most beautiful woman in my eyes. I never thought I would wait for this moment." Xanda's eyes were also red. "Brother Jasper, no matter how long I wait, I won't regret it." Iker gave Jasper and Xanda the rings, and the officiant presided, "Please put the rings on each other." After putting on the rings, Jasper hugged Xanda and kissed her. I watched coldly from below as the lovers finally got together, and I didn't feel the pain I had imagined. Perhaps I had already cried all my tears when I was sad. Zoe beside me gritted her teeth. That pair of dogs and the white-eyed wolf son. I patted her back. "Don't be angry. It's not worth it for people like them." Hudson snorted. "You were crying so sadly earlier. Now you're so magnanimous." Zoe glared at Hudson. "I agreed to bring you here so you could support Yvonne, not so you could sneer." Hudson shrugged. "I just can't stand it." The play on stage continued. After the kiss, Zanna blushed. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Even if it's fake, I'm willing to do it." "Jasper, I wish life could stop at this moment, but unfortunately it can't. This period has been as beautiful as a dream. Today is the last day, and after that I'll return you to Yvonne." She couldn't help but cry. Jasper hugged Xanda comfortingly. Seeing this, Iker choked up and stepped forward. "Aunt Xanda, although we are not related by blood, you are my real mother in my heart. No one can compare." The three of them hugged each other and cried. After Xanda finished crying, she looked at me in the audience. "Yvonne, I'll leave Jasper to you. Promise me you'll take good care of him. He has a stomach problem, so he needs to take his medicine on time. He's lactose intolerant, so he can't eat anything with lactose." I interrupted her. "I'm not willing to take on such a troublesome person. You keep him." Jasper's face changed when he heard this. "Yvonne, what do you mean?" Wasn't I clear enough? "I'm leaving you and Iker to Xanda. I don't want either of you anymore." The guests below were puzzled and began to look at Jasper and the others strangely. Hudson slowly walked out from behind me and took my hand in full view of everyone. Jasper, who was still asking me not to be willful, paused. "Yvonne, I told you, this is just to satisfy our son's wish. Iker is seriously ill. Aren't we doing all this just to make him happy?" Iker, who was pale beside him, echoed, "Yeah, Mom. You said, as long as I'm willing to get treatment, you'll satisfy anything." I curled my lips. "Yes, but the premise of satisfying you is that you're really sick." "But are you really sick?" Jasper and Iker's faces turned pale. Iker looked at me helplessly, trying to explain. "Mom." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't call me Mom. Your dad and I are divorced." "Your mom is over there." Xanda walked over, dragging her wedding dress. "Yvonne, why are you doing this?" "It was Iker who wanted to fulfill my wish, so he lied to you. If you have any grievances, take them out on me." I responded with a crisp slap. "Ah." Xanda covered her face, incredulous. "How dare you hit me?" I rubbed my sore wrist. "I hit you for that." At this point, I didn't want to waste any more words, so I grabbed the microphone from the officiant and said loudly, "I, Yvonne, have been married to Jasper for 10 years, and we have a son together. A while ago, my son said he was seriously ill, and his biggest wish was to see Xanda wear a wedding dress and marry my husband. To satisfy my son, I agreed to divorce Jasper, but I found out that my son's illness was fabricated by them to deceive me into getting a divorce. The whole hall was in an uproar. Now that I've figured it out, since they want to be a family of 3 so much, I'll let them be." I looked at Jasper. "Jasper, I can't remarry you. I wish you and Xanda a happy marriage." Jasper was already unsteady, but still forced himself to ask me, "Is it because of Hudson? When did you rekindle your old relationship with Hudson?" I laughed. How could I have fallen for someone like him? Even at this point, he was still trying to shift the blame onto me. Isn't the reason for our divorce very clear? That was just a fake marriage. I'll remarry you later. I was too lazy to argue with him in circles, so I pulled Zoe and Hudson away from there. After getting into the car, Zoe looked at me worriedly. "Are you okay?" I shook my head. Things have come to this point, I've already let it go. Just think of these 10 years as feeding a dog. It's not too late to wake up now. Hudson, who was driving, turned around frequently after hearing my words, but didn't say anything. Zoe clapped her hands. "What are you going to do now that you've said goodbye to the scumbag and your white-eyed wolf son?" Before I could speak, Hudson spoke first. "How about trying to go abroad with me?" "Go abroad? Why?" Hudson thought for a moment. "You used to love fashion design so much, but you gave it up later because of your marriage. Now that you're free, why not pick up your youthful dream again? Wouldn't it be the best choice to go to France with me to study?" Yes, Hudson's words made me a little dazed. Runways, France, these unreachable words used to be so close to me. It was just that they were put on hold indefinitely after I got married. Should I listen to Hudson? 5. I need to gather my thoughts right now. I'm going to put Hudson's words aside. After packing my luggage, I left the home where I had lived for more than a decade. I boarded a plane to City. As I boarded the plane, I saw a familiar figure again. When he realized I recognized him, he took off his sunglasses without trying to hide. "Are you following me?" Hudson smirked. "I also have the urge to travel to City." I smiled and didn't expose Hudson's lie. As we walked side by side, our hands kept touching until they finally clasped together. I just wanted some comfort, nothing more. After getting on the plane, without any surprise, Hudson sat next to me. I thought I wouldn't be able to sleep after tearing down this veil of old dust. Unexpectedly, when I woke up, I was leaning on Hudson's shoulder. "I'm sorry I slept too soundly." Hudson shook his head and couldn't help but make a sound as he moved his shoulders. I leaned over to massage him. "You wouldn't have stayed still for those few hours, would you?" He was silent, but I already knew the answer. "You're still the same. You never know how to speak up after doing something. It was you who helped me find the bone marrow that was compatible with Iker, right?" Hudson nodded. "I just didn't want you to work so hard." He's always been like that, doing things but never taking the initiative to say anything. When I was younger, I was often annoyed by his silent behavior. Thinking about it now, it was good to be young, to have so many experiences to quarrel about. We broke up because we were exhausted after constant arguing, and it was also because Hudson was going abroad. After the breakup, I couldn't get over it for a long time, and I didn't want to know anything about Hudson. Unexpectedly, after several years, fate brought us together again. The reason I chose City as a place to relax is because it's a place I've always wanted to go. When I was married to Jasper, he promised me we would go there for our honeymoon. But after we got married, Jasper's mother fell ill, so I had to put down my work and carefully take care of her at the bedside. Jasper said he would help me when he finished work, but in fact, he only came a few times, and he left after sitting for a while each time. I was exhausted and had no time to think about his promise. All these years, I've been working hard, working to make money, taking care of my children, and doing housework, busy being a virtuous wife and mother in the worldly sense. I've never thought of looking up at the sky. As soon as I got off the plane, I was attracted by the clear sky of City. That clear blue seemed to seep into people's hearts, and the soft white clouds were hanging in the sky. In the distance, there was the ancient song of a minority nationality, and everything was so beautiful. Hudson extended his hand to me. "Let's go, let's take a look." 6. This time in City has been the most relaxing time I've had since I got married. There was none of the petty annoyances of raising children, and no arguments with Jasper. When Zoe video chatted with me, she exclaimed, "You look so much younger recently, and your complexion is much better." I touched my face. The previous toil had made me look more than 10 years older than my age. Hudson knocked on my door. and invited me to go clam digging. Zoe's eyes looked at Hudson behind me through the lens. Her voice became ambiguous. You two. Aren't you really rekindling your old flame? What are you talking about? We're both too old for that. I quickly told Zoe not to talk nonsense. Although Hudson didn't say anything, the joy in his eyes couldn't be faked. I won't say anymore. We're going clam digging. Come and play with us if you have time. After hanging up the phone, Hudson and I walked towards the beach. I was originally wondering why we would choose to go clam digging in the evening. What could we catch at this time? When I got to the beach, I understood. Under the afterglow of the evening sun, candles arranged in the shape of a heart were flickering. A prepared singer also began to sing love songs. Hudson knelt down on one knee and slowly took out a ring. Marry me. These 3 simple words were like a heavy punch to my heart. I knew Hudson's efforts and thoughts. If the hand-holding on the plane was just me seeking comfort, nothing more. But in our subsequent interactions, I deeply felt Hudson's sincerity. After so many years, he could still remember my dietary preferences and was considerate and gentle. This was something Jasper after marriage had never given me. In our marriage, there was always someone else, Zanna. At the wedding, Jasper's mother pulled Zanna aside and said to me, Yvonne, this is the girl who was engaged to Jasper before. I was surprised that she could appear at my wedding. From then on, Zanna never left. 7. Now I have doubts. Looking at Hudson with his eyes full of anticipation, my first thought was to doubt him. Jasper was also very attentive to me before marriage. But what about after? Could Hudson be the next Jasper? I couldn't be sure. After all, I don't have another 10 years to gamble with. No. Before I could finish, Hudson interrupted me. He took out a contract from his pocket. I took it and saw that it was a property transfer agreement. It stated that I would receive 2/3 of Hudson's assets after marriage. I looked up in shock. Are you crazy? Hudson's trembling voice revealed his earnestness. I'm not crazy, on the contrary, I'm very clear about what I'm doing. Giving you property isn't to tie you down with them, but to show you my determination. Being with me, I won't leave you for the rest of my life, and if you want to divorce me, then you'll have them and live comfortably. I understood what he meant, and from Zoe, I also knew his current wealth and status. Being willing to give up so much is enough to show his determination. But, Hudson continued, I know you've been hurt in your relationship and don't believe in love anymore. But Yvonne, we missed each other when we were young. Should we continue to miss each other now? This sentence made me silent. Looking at Hudson in front of me, he was no longer young, but the vicissitudes of life had not made him tired, but had added more charm. Yes, from the time I broke up with Hudson to when we met again, more than half a lifetime has passed. While I was hesitating, Hudson quickly put the ring on my ring finger. He stood up and kissed me hard. Holding my hand, he said to me, Believe me, I will definitely give you happiness. The people around began to cheer, and Hudson hugged me, but a familiar voice broke the happy atmosphere. Mom. 8. I let go of Hudson and turned to see Jasper, Iker and Zanna. Zanna glanced at Hudson a few times, then forcefully pulled the Patek Philippe off his wrist and said to me, Yvonne, we've been looking all over for you. Jasper even asked all his friends and relatives. I didn't expect you to be here with another man. Jasper's face turned ashen. Yvonne, are you still with Hudson? You said there was no rekindling of the old flame. Hudson replied disdainfully, Do I need to remind you? How did you steal her away from me back then? Jasper took a deep breath and thought of something. So what, she's my wife? Not anymore, don't forget, you're already divorced. It's still the lie you made up to deceive Yvonne and get a divorce from you. Hearing this, Jasper's face turned from green to white. He stammered, It was just for a moment. Yvonne, I know you're angry because you were deceived, and Iker and I have already realized our mistakes. We've specially brought Iker here to apologize to you. With that, he pushed Iker. He bit his lip and walked over to me, handing me a bouquet of carnations. Mom, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Iker was born from my womb after all, and I still have a blood connection with him. When he was young, he would help me wash dishes and sweep the floor. On Mother's Day, He would give me a greeting card made with childish paintbrushes. When did things change? I don't know when. He stopped being close to me. Every time I was strict with him about his studies or homework, he would always mention Zanna's goodness. Aunt Zanna wouldn't yell at me like that. Aunt Zanna would buy me fries. Aunt Zanna. Until once, during an argument, he shouted at me, his voice filled with strong resentment towards me. Why are you my mother? Why isn't Aunt Zanna my mother? I was stunned. For a mother who loves her children, such words were like the sharpest weapon in the world. Iker and I were in a long Cold War, which ended when Jasper forced Iker to apologize to me. I carefully examined this child, trying to see if he was sincere in his simple apology. Iker looked at me and called me mom again. This voice reminded me of what I heard outside the ward. That stupid mom is so easy to deceive. If it wasn't for love, who would be so foolishly deceived? Iker. He and Jasper looked at me expectantly. You once asked me why Zanna wasn't your mother. And later, in order to make Zanna your mother, you pretended to be sick and deceived me. Now I'm fulfilling your wish. I'm no longer your mother. Iker's face turned pale. Mom, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. But even when he couldn't help but cry, I didn't relent. And you, Jasper? 9. Xanda has been around since the beginning of our marriage. I've always wondered, since Xanda is so good, why didn't you marry her in the first place? Jasper's lips trembled. I love you. Xanda, standing aside, looked hurt when she heard that. I scoffed. Love? How ridiculous. You say you love me, but you're entangled with Xanda. You say you love me, but you turned around and schemed with your son to deceive me, so you could marry Xanda. Jasper, your love is too cheap. Hearing this, Hudson put his arm around my shoulder and said in a deep voice, if I had known you would treat Yvonne like this back then, I would have taken Yvonne back no matter what. Jasper, what kind of man are you? After saying this, Jasper and the others had nothing to say. Hudson, in front of them, raised my right hand with the ring on it. Back at the homestay, Hudson, unable to contain himself, knocked on my door. As soon as I opened the door, I was enveloped in a cold atmosphere. Hudson hugged me tightly. He muttered, Yvonne, you won't be fooled by Jasper's sweet talk again, will you? I could feel his intense unease. I patted his back and softly comforted him. No, I won't make the same mistake twice. That night, Hudson and I hugged each other tightly. We talked about the bits and pieces of the years we had missed each other. Early the next morning, I went out of the homestay to watch the sunrise and saw Jasper standing in the yard, his figure lonely. When he saw me come out, his body moved, and he fell to his knees, unable to support himself. I watched coldly and walked past him. Yvonne, is there really no possibility for us? He asked behind me. I didn't answer, believing that silence was the best answer. When I reached the beach, Hudson was already waiting there. When he saw me, he smiled. In his eyes, I saw the boy he used to be. You're here. I nodded and hugged him tightly. Behind us, the brilliant morning sun rose, and from now on, there would be no more gloom. 10. Iker's side story. I never believed that my mom would abandon me, so when my mom said she wouldn't remarry at Aunt Zanna's wedding, I wasn't too scared. After they left, my dad and I were busy dealing with the guests who had come. I received a lot of strange looks from them. I couldn't help but feel wronged and wondered how I would tell her when I got home. It's all your fault. You made me lose face in front of everyone. I imagined her guilty face after I finished speaking, and she might even make her signature chicken soup. But all my fantasies turned to nothing when we got home. She had disappeared from the house, along with her luggage. I stared at the blank wall where the family portrait used to hang, and realized her determination this time. I looked at my dad, and in the reflection of his eyes, I saw my panicked face. I didn't know where my mom had gone. My dad and I searched frantically. Finally, we found Aunt Zoe's house. She chased us out with a broom. When I was a kid, every time my mom brought me to Aunt Zoe's house, she would give me the best candy. She would smile and pat my head, praising me for being the cutest baby. Now she was furious, shouting at my dad. You still have the face to ask me where Yvonne went. I want to ask you too. You know very well how Yvonne treated you. She hasn't done anything wrong to you. I won't tell you where she is." My dad's face turned ashen as he listened to Aunt Zoe. "And you?" She pointed at me. "You ungrateful brat. Your mother should have given up on you when she was in labor. She suffered for a whole day and night before giving birth to you. And you, for an outsider, you deceived your own mother." I hung my head in shame. Aunt Zoe's words made me even more panicked. What should I do? What if my mom really doesn't want me anymore? I'm just a child without a mother. Aunt Zanna comforted me. "I've always treated you as my own son." I used to be moved when I heard this, but now I couldn't take it at all. All I could think about was finding my mom back. When I arrived in N City, I happened to see the scene of her being proposed to. At that moment, my heart was squeezed tightly. There was a glimmer of light in my mother's eyes, something I had never seen in so many years. But when she saw us, it immediately disappeared. I apologized to her, but this time she didn't forgive me and hug me like she used to. After saying, "Zanna is your mother now," she turned and left. I cried uncontrollably as I watched her back. I knew she would never forgive me again. 11. Jasper's side story. My story with Yvonne is a long one. I first saw her at a university arts festival. She was a fashion design major, and I heard that the models on the stage were wearing her designs. She was a very talented woman, quite famous in school, and had many suitors. From the first time I saw her, I fell in love with her. My love for her was more of admiration. At that time, I still couldn't let go of someone my first love, Zanna. Zanna and I grew up together. She was sweet and cute, and very dependent on me. But neither of us dared to reveal our feelings. I thought Zanna didn't love me. In my sophomore year, I saw a photo of her holding hands on Zanna's social media platform. At that moment, I finally gave up hope. It was also that year that I began to pursue Yvonne aggressively. Yvonne was actually not as cold as she seemed. At first, she resisted my pursuit, but later, seeing my persistence, her attitude towards me gradually improved. I hadn't contacted Zanna for a long time, and that day Zanna suddenly contacted me, asking why I hadn't contacted her. Thinking of that photo of holding hands, I couldn't help but feel sad. I made an excuse, saying I was busy and didn't have time to chat. She seemed angry. She even blocked me on social media. My mood was very bad that day, but Yvonne actually asked me out. She seemed to have never been in a relationship before, and she blushed just from having dinner together. I deliberately ordered some wine that day. Soon we were both drunk and spent the night at a nearby hotel. I took her virginity, thinking that I had to be responsible for her. After all, a girl's first time is very important. But thinking of Zanna, I still felt a little regret. However, rather than finding someone I love, it's better to find someone who loves me. Yvonne was very good to me, and she took good care of me in every aspect of life. We even moved in together ahead of time. I found that after being with her, there were fewer troubles in life. The year we graduated, we both went to find jobs. She applied for a designer position at a large company. Well, the salary and benefits were very high, but I always felt that her boss had ulterior motives for her. This silly woman, she seemed unable to see it. I couldn't find a suitable job at that time. Yvonne was beautiful and capable, and I was actually afraid that she would be with someone else. So I persuaded her, could she leave that company? That was our first argument. 12. She thought I was being overly suspicious, saying that her boss was just treating her like a normal subordinate. As a man, how could I not know what her boss was thinking? She didn't agree. At that time, she valued her career more than me. To teach her a lesson, I gave her the cold shoulder for over half a month. I deliberately sent some ambiguous messages to Zanna. I did like Zanna, so sending her those messages wasn't really being a jerk, was it? That night, Zanna was drunk and wanted to meet me for a drink. Yvonne happened to see the message. She cried and asked me what my relationship with Zanna was. I was still angry that she wasn't willing to quit her job. I continued to ignore her until she broke down. She cried and told me that she was innocent with her boss, and of course I knew she was innocent. I just didn't like those men who threatened me hanging around my girlfriend. I told her to quit her job, or we would break up. She agreed. It seemed that after that incident, she became much easier to control. After a year of living together, Yvonne accidentally got pregnant with my child. At that time, I still hadn't found a satisfactory job, so I still had her abort the child. She cried every day after losing the child. To be honest, I was a bit annoyed with her, but my sense of responsibility compelled me to understand and tolerate her. That year, I met a supervisor who appreciated me. My position kept rising, and I also gave Yvonne the wedding as promised. On the day of the wedding, when the officiant asked me if I loved her, I saw Xanda in the guest seats. I was very confused. I couldn't say how I felt. That day, Xanda was drunk and cried to me that she loved me. I was even more confused. Why didn't you tell me earlier? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have married Yvonne. But it was too late. 13. Later, Yvonne and I had a son. My son was closer to me and would often chat with me. Over time, he also noticed the regret in my heart. I asked him not to tell his mom, but my son supported me and encouraged me to pursue my true love. My son came up with an idea. He asked a friend to fake a leukemia medical record. When Yvonne, who had always been in good health, saw that medical record, she fell ill immediately. My son said that his only wish before he died was to see Zanna wear a wedding dress and marry me. I thought Yvonne would refuse, but to my surprise, she agreed. To be honest, if it had been right after we got married, maybe I still loved Zanna. But I had been married to Yvonne for 15 years. I felt like I couldn't live without her. But Xanda had been waiting for me for 15 years, and I didn't want to let her down. I divorced Yvonne, and as I wished, I held a wedding with Zanna. But from then on, Yvonne changed a lot. She stopped caring about me and wouldn't even reply to my messages. I started to vaguely feel that I was going to lose her. It was also from then on that I truly realized how important Yvonne was to me. I tried everything to win her back, but she seemed to really not want me or our son anymore. It turned out that she had long known the truth about our son's lie. Later, Xanda and I didn't end up together either. I don't know why. Whenever I saw her, I would think of Yvonne. I hated her, and I also knew I had wronged her. Later, Xanda went abroad and got married, but she wasn't happy, and Yvonne found her own place and became a famous designer in the country. I stopped bothering her. I just kept all her things and prayed that she could live a good life.